My mother's fiancé stole my $7,000 college savings, and my family used my dad's inheritance without telling me. My grandparents on my mother's side are making me a lot of hate after my mother and her fiancé were detained. I had good cause to call the cops on them, hence this happened. My mother and I never got along, particularly given that my dad died 10 years ago. Right now I'm 17. In a few months I should be beginning college. I realized I would have to work for myself and create my own plans since, sadly, I knew my mother would never have any money saved away for me. I started working at 14 years old. After school, I would work part-time. For 4 years, I had been saving to have at least some money left aside. I would also save it as I usually get cash from my relatives on my birthdays as presents and occasionally on holidays. I was really glad to have almost $7,000 saved thus far. Of course, it was all in cash, and I kept it carefully stashed in a small wooden box my father had fashioned for me in a little nook of my cupboard. My mother never let me open a bank account, hence that was out of the question as I never had one. I never told my mother or anybody else about the money, hence I'm not sure how anyone came upon it. Still, a few days ago I discovered the box was absolutely empty. When I approached my mother about it, she informed me her fiancé had taken the money to put toward his new property. Finding out what had transpired sent me totally insane. My mom and her fiancé were on one side of the great argument raging in the home while I was on another. Ultimately though, I am just 17 and they are in power right now, so I had to compromise. This was my life, hence the only thing I could do was walk up to my room, shut myself in, and spend hours crying as I would have to start over yet once more. Before college, I wasn't even sure if I could save enough money for anything. I felt so demoralized and totally lost. That day I formed my mental picture. Since it cannot go unpacked, I was planning to exact revenge on them. Though it was a really large choice, fortunately I was able to extract revenge exactly 3 days later. They have now been arrested and are paying for the crime they did. My sole issue with this whole situation is that my always on my side grandparents are now against me and it just doesn't make sense anymore. For the past 2 years, my mother's fiancé, I'll call him Rob, has been in my life. I have despised every single second of it since he is simply among the most horrible persons I have ever known. I would even consider him to be abusive. Clearly vocally and emotionally rather than physically. Usually my mother takes the most of it, but sometimes he loses his patience with me too and says anything that comes to mind. He curses me out, tries his very best to make me cry like my mother, and becomes even more enraged when he discovers I don't care. This causes him to lose even more control of his tongue and what he says. My mother never bothers to defend me. After my dad went away, my mother did not date anyone for the first couple of years. Then she met Rob later. He was polite and reasonable for the first few months, but he began displaying his actual colors after their first major argument. 6 months into their marriage, he had moved in with us and begun controlling my mother. He could hardly hang on any work and was a deadbeat, no-good imbecile. Contextually, he is in his mid to late 30s and still depends on his parents for money sometimes since he has utterly poor financial sense and wastes more money than he makes. He borrows money from his parents when he is battling with my mother. When he's not, he's comfortable enough leeching off her. The unfortunate thing is that my mother is not quite rich. She brings home a reasonable amount but not enough to maintain Rob's ostentatious lifestyle. She is a floor supervisor at our neighborhood grocery. Still, I never let it start to trouble me. I always aim to be as self-sufficient as I can. From the age of 14, I have refrained from asking my mother anything except for basics. Not even would I ask her to pay for those once I started working part-time. I really rely on her for shelter and food. I never ask her to buy me anything. That's all. I know that even expecting that is somewhat stupid, thus I do not expect her to do anything more for me. From the start, she has made it rather evident that she despises me. She never really treated me well even as a little child, and I always felt as though she didn't even want me. That impression developed into a belief as I grew older. At least earlier, I had my dad to have my back and stand up to my mother anytime she would get too mad at me. But I was on my own once he went away, and that is how it has been for the last few years. Things grew worse when Rob arrived, but I always comforted myself by reminding myself that shortly I would be off to college and wouldn't have to worry about any of this. That feels dark and improbable right now. I stayed in my room and did nothing for the 3 days my money was taken away because I was so depressed. We moved into our new house the day I found out all my money had been seized. I did all the required work, but I avoided talking to either of the 2 persons living with me. They seemed no worse for it either. My mother instructed me to get ready for the evening housewarming party on the 3rd day. Having had my money snatched from me, I started yelling at her and told her I wouldn't be doing anything of the such. Their sole means of purchasing this mansion had been the money they pilfered from me. That particularly infuriated my mother. Referring to the fact she had raised me, she advised me to be glad for them now that we were finally living in our own house and not a rented property, and should just suck it up and let things go since I owe them for life anyhow. Which is not even logical since she was legally obligated to do it, and it is not like she gave me any great favor. Regarding the house, it was very large for the three of us anyway. I knew they had purchased this house specifically to wow everyone with their elegant address and large residence. That day I was quite agitated and chose to phone the parents of my father. Something I had never done before. It was complicated as my paternal grandparents had cut off contact with our family when my dad died. I suppose it hurt too much for them to keep in touch. They cut ties and we stopped having speaking terms. I'm not sure why, but I still had their numbers, so as a last resort I chose to phone them since my mother's grandparents, with whom I had a stronger relationship, were really somewhat neutral in this regard. I told my mother's parents about the day my money was taken, expecting they would speak with her and assist in resolving things for me. On the plus side, we would at last have a place of our own and wouldn't have to worry about rent. They just stated they were delighted my mother could purchase a new house. They advised me to hunt the silver lining. Their response seemed strange to me since, up to now, they had always understood me. Though they would silently support me, they never challenged my mother. This time was different and I couldn't make sense of it. I avoided them once more since I was also furious with them. That same day, when my mother advised me to swallow it, I made contact with my paternal grandparents in search of a different answer, one that may provide some future hope. It was only a gut feeling. Luckily they answered the call, and I told them everything right away. I said I knew they were hurt and didn't want to keep in touch, but because this was an emergency and I thought my dad would have wanted them to help me should he still be alive. I told them my mother had grabbed all of my savings, which I had been saving for over a few years to cover college. I suddenly had no idea whether that was even possible anymore. After listening to me, my grandfather started something that baffled me. He informed me that evidently my dad left a college fund for me, so he didn't know why I had to save money separately. That news surprised me as my mother had never mentioned a college fund and I never asked her since I figured she hadn't saved any money for me. Knowing his death was very certain, I had totally forgotten what my dad might have done for me before he died. He passed really young, hence I assumed he might not have had time to arrange for me. I was astounded when my grandparents told me this. Furious and annoyed as well, I asked them whether they had any documentation or evidence I might use against my mother. They promised to hunt for something and call me later. I stayed in my room attempting to fit everything together for several hours. I came to see that Rob and my mother had clearly teamed together and pilfers my college money to purchase this mansion. From what I knew, my mother did not make enough money to buy the house. Regarding Rob, he had not worked anywhere for the past 3 months, thus I strongly questioned whether he could afford a residence of this kind. I would then report them to the police. I simply needed something to validate this. My grandparents finally contacted me after waiting for a few hours and supplied pictures of some documents my mother had actually signed saying she would use the money my father left her to pay for my college tuition and guarantee I had a comfortable life. She had done everything but guarantee that my life was comfortable, so I literally laughed out loud when I read it. She indeed went out of her way to make my life more unpleasant. Still, Mother had signed those papers, and it infuriated me that my grandparents had never mentioned it until after my dad died. They had simply left me behind, and my mother had not really been there for me. Though I believe it was all a show, my mother and grandparents tried to be there for me. My dad's parents were too consumed in their own loss to give me any thought. My grandparents gave a somewhat poor response when I inquired why they had never shown me these papers prior. At the time, I was too young anyhow. They told me they had sort of forgotten about it when my dad died. And once I grew older, we were not on speaking terms anymore, and it had escaped their thoughts since they too were getting older. I just let it go since I couldn't dispute that. Once I received the evidence, I phoned a friend whose dad was on the force and explained I needed his assistance. So in the evening, just as the housewarming party was getting underway, my friend's father arrived with another cop and a lawyer to arrest my mom and her fiancé. Their commitment had been obviously breached, and the problem was not only that promise breaking. My mother had essentially opened herself to a lawsuit by straying from what she had promised, therefore breaching the terms of the agreement she had signed all those years ago. My mother and Rob were finally arrested while I was showing the party attendees everything. That felt, in my life, the most vindicated I had ever experienced. Like several of their ex-co-workers and friends, almost everyone they had planned to wow was appalled as they watched them being revealed and hauled away under handcuffs. They continued to glare at me as if I had done something wrong, too proud and arrogant even then. When their daughter was being brought away in handcuffs, My mother's grandparents were also at the party and became quite irate and avoided talking to me following the event. I was by myself in the house once everyone had departed and had no idea what to do. Though they had been arrested, they would most likely be released on bail in a few hours, hence I was devastated. Furthermore, it would take months to prove everything even if I intended to charge them. Even then, should they be able to turn things around for themselves, they had a great possibility of being let off the hook. I wouldn't get back the money meant for me till then. There was just no knowing what would happen. I would still be losing out no matter what. The names on the deed were Rob's and Mom's, not mine, hence I cannot precisely sell the house either. I would have to battle the matter with a lawyer even if I wanted to formally compel her to sell the house and pay me the money. Now, since my friend and his father kindly offered to help to organize everything, I was free from concern about the expense of that. They reassured me I should not worry about it as they know what I'm going through and live close by. Now though, I'm not sure what to do. Worse, the few people I had on my side are no longer in contact with me. Because they think I have been unappreciative, my mother's grandparents expressed no desire in talking with me. They stated they knew I didn't get along with my mother, but sending her to jail for something like this didn't sit right with them given all she had done for me. Their lack of desire for any interaction with me truly set me off. I feel totally alone right now. Although right now I may have defeated Rob and my mother, over time I feel like I have lost far more. I simply feel very powerless right now and am not sure what to do. Am I the asshole for having my mother and her fiancé jailed for pilfering my cash to cover their new property purchase? Update 1. Hi there, out of the house Rob and my mother bought. I have moved. I reported them to the police 1 week ago, hence this is why. They were let go after 48 hours of custody and returned home. I opted to depart right away upon learning they would be returning as I wanted no confrontation. I stepped out when they came in as I had already packed my belongings. Though I didn't want to interact with them, they urged me to stop and chat. I left just as fast as I could. Having previously phoned a taxi, I got in and proceeded straight to my friend's house, where I have spent the past 3 days. For record's sake, this is the same friend whose dad assisted with the lawyer and arrest. Now the lawyer, the father of my friend and I are collaborating daily to find out how to finish things up as fast as feasible. I am somewhat desperate at this moment, thus I am ready to get to a compromise. In a few days we have scheduled a meeting for their attorney, them, and a court-appointed mediator. The negotiations will show how things go. Should they reject my terms, we will have to bring this before court, which could take some time. Though I want it to be fair, I am trying my best to reach a resolution. I want the money I need to complete my schooling. For now, my friend's father has informed me I should expect financial aid from them. But, I am reluctant to take financial support from anyone else since it seems odd. Regarding my grandparents, none has contacted me yet. Clearly, my father's parents and my mother's grandparents stopped talking to me straight after they emailed me pictures of the paperwork. Apart from that, we haven't interacted thus far. I have gathered those records from them personally to provide some concrete evidence as well. They were fairly indifferent about the whole situation even when I walked over to pick those records from them. Though they wished me the best, they did not offer to assist me or even extend an invitation for me to perhaps visit or perhaps interview. Since their behavior has been truly unusual for me to cope with, I really have no idea what's going on with them. So far, things have been somewhat disappointing. Nevertheless, I only hope I can overcome this fast so I may begin college. To be honest, right now I am only going by that. Of course, my friends are being rather helpful, which I truly appreciate because right now I have no family to talk of. Only these folks are really concerned about me. Update 2. Hi. Thus right now I'm not sure what to say as there has been an exciting development. What I discovered is terrible, hence I am literally shivering with rage. Once more, this is somewhat dubious, but my mother showed screenshots, thus I'm not sure what to believe. What happened was that today, just a few hours ago, my mother emailed me. There were just 2 days left until our mediation appointment. She said she really ought to talk to me. She couldn't get to me since I had blocked her everywhere else, but she opened a new email account and sent me something that truly screwed everything I knew to be true. I will hence not waste time. I will just get right to the point. Against me, my whole family plotted. Indeed, the reason all of my grandparents have been so strange throughout the process is that they have all been in on from the start. Not only had my mother squandered the money left to me by my father for herself, but all of them had taken their fair share and kept their lips closed in return. Because she had dirt on them, I at last know why my maternal grandparents were offended that I had reported my mother to the police and why they always seemed to be worried for me but never really stood up for me when it came to her. I also now understand why my paternal grandparents had never even bothered to notify me that these signed papers my mother had left existed until I asked them. My mother emailed me evidence of each of their having been in on this. She spoke with them when I was maybe 14 or 15 years old. She fortunately had all of this on file since they were stupid enough to have these email exchanges. She forwarded me screenshots of these emails. Since I got her arrested, my mother advised me it was only right that I bring these individuals into the matter as well, since it wouldn't be fair for her to be punished when they had all collaborated against me to hide the money and use it for themselves. My dad left a lot of money for me, and all these people, including his attorney, thought it would be better for them to keep it from me and spend it for themselves. This is still unbelievable to me. Over and over I've been reading that email, trying to make sense of it since it seems ridiculous that all these people, including my dad's own parents, were against me. It's really rather shockingly amazing. Their conscience had finally checked in and they had a change of heart, therefore the sole reason they had notified me about the papers my mother had signed and given me the evidence recently. When I phoned them to get aid, they chose to tell me the truth since they understood what they were doing was wrong. Although my mother and her parents had persuaded them not to tell me the truth as it would also bring them down, they had been intending to do this way earlier. Although they had assured me they would not come to tell me everything, if I ever asked they would most certainly be honest. All of this came to light when I inquired whether there was anything they could do to assist. They chose to offer me those records as evidence. Though it makes me happy they decided to assist me back then, it does not clear them. It also clarifies their strange and distant behavior even after helping me out, because they were guilty. They are truly ashamed, which they should be, yet they still cannot own what they did. Right now though, my brain is simply not working as it should. I just know how to handle any of this. I have no idea what to believe in. Since it's so vast and practically driving me crazy, I haven't even told my friend about what I discovered. All at once I feel deceived, hurt and enraged. Right now I have no idea what to do with these feelings. Given this is a significant development and we will most certainly bring this up during the discussions, I clearly have to discuss this with my attorney. Forgetting that she would also be losing out on a lot of things because of this process, my mother tried to flip the tide against the ones who exposed her. She told me all of this. And I'm happy she did, as I believe I should have known that other than a small number of people, nobody has my back on this planet. I guess this is how it is since I cannot rely on anyone. Right now, the only thing left to do is inform my friend so he may notify his father. Then we can all get down with my lawyer and discuss what to do about this and forward direction. Still, I am most sure I will be attending college this year. I am not waversing. I have made my mind. I'm ready to ask the dad of a friend for assistance. Right now, I guess I will ask him to be a co-signer on my loan application. I am not asking him to pay my college tuition right now. Update 3. Hi, so we met with the mediator today and, as I mentioned, I very definitely mentioned what my mother had told me in the email. She basically came clean about everything she had done, and now she will have to pay for the money she and the rest of my family have pilfers from me. She also claimed though, that some of the money went toward my upbringing, so we shouldn't hold it against her and shouldn't expect her to reimburse any of the sum taken. I do not buy it though. My grandparents have to do as well. They stole not only that money, but also my hopes and aspirations. I want them to give it back to me so I may have a dignified life. I am not going to be reliant anymore. My friend's dad and my attorney told me that although these kinds of things are not unusual, they do not diminish the cunning and repulsive nature of it. Like me, they were enraged and properly so. They promised me they would make sure I wouldn't have to rely on anybody else for money my entire life. After my dad died, the type of money they pilfers would have made me comfortable for every single year of my life. Although he had done all the necessary steps to ensure I led a contented life, my family found it unacceptable. They just were selfish, hence they had to be taken away from me. Not that will fly with me anymore. After our conversation, my attorney and I agreed we were going for the throat. Particularly on my dime, there is no need for us to back off and let them have themselves. Though things were somewhat harsh there, one thing is certain. We will be meeting once more, and this time my grandparents, all of them, will be present as obviously they have also been involved in this. Things might go to court, but I'm going to deal with a student loan till then. I will ensure I get my justice. More than justice, I have to retrieve from them, money taken from me. Since the money was meant for me just and nobody else, all of them had to reimburse me. Although my mother agreed differently, they also betrayed their pledge to my father, to keep me safe and content. I never want to see them once more since they are all failures.
Thank you for watching. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do so and hit the notification bell to stay updated with more shocking real-life stories happening around you.